It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the gigantic Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all the people, not just to the educated upper class. Because the desire for freedom is classless. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind and in the human soul. Today we face another time of turmoil, of anger, and very, very serious partisan division. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done best in the past and see if we can't use some of that to help us now. We understand that they created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any other country on earth. They weren't perfect men and women, and neither are we. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Welcome back to Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. Today we are covering a very serious subject, and we hope that we can bring some common sense to it because there may be some lacking. We're going to talk about, obviously, COVID-19, not just its effect, but its effect on the economy and what it's doing to the economy. Our first guest is going to be Steve Moore, and our second guest is going to be Tony Carbonetti, my former chief of staff, and the man who was principally in charge, along with Joe Loader, in managing the September 11 emergency, the worst we've ever had, and some others. Steve Moore, who will be interviewed just in a moment, was a senior advisor to Donald Trump when he was the successful candidate for president of the United States in 2016. I worked very closely with Steve, consider him a personal friend, and he is now presently very active advising the president on how to deal with this impact on our economy. So we go to Steve first. Well, we have with us Steve Moore. Steve is in Washington, working away and trying to help us through this. Steve was, as you know, one of the main senior advisors to Donald J. Trump when he ran for president of the United States, one of the people that helped to shape Trumponomics, and then wrote an excellent book called Trumponomics, which you should read. It describes the Trump view of the economy better than any book I've read. And I got to know Steve for a long time in New York, but then particularly on the campaign. And there are very few people who know as much about not only the economy, but Donald Trump's view of the economy, which, of course, is critical right now. So I'm so glad to be talking to him. Steve, how are you?
Mr. Mayor, it's a great privilege to be on your podcast. Thank you very much. I've been doing better, but we're going to get through this. And I thank God we have a steady hand at the helm, and Donald Trump, who knows how to run a business and how to deal with a financial crisis, which we are in right now.
Well, his steadiness is remarkable. Steve, you know, I've been through several terrible tragedies, particularly 9/11, and I could see the people who could lead and the people who couldn't. And Donald Trump is just a natural at this, and we're very, very fortunate to have him. But this is a strange effect on the economy. I mean, usually the effects on the economy come from within the economy. The last one, of course, you know, being debt and a lot of the activities of Wall Street, some of them being industry phasing out or mistakes made in the economy. This is an outside effect. It's, God forbid, almost like an atomic attack or a or some kind of external force. So how do you describe its effect on the economy now? And then what do we expect after? This is going to go away. They all do. Then what happens? What's left?
Well, a couple of points. First of all, let's start from the beginning. One of my frustrations, because I did work with Larry Kudlow and you and others on that campaign team in 2016, and Trump has so just incredibly revitalized the American economy. And I had seen the president back in February. I said, Mr. President, this is working out better than even we thought it would.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah, and the economy was absolutely, my frustration is that the economy, as of the end of February, was absolutely booming. We had that 350,000 jobs report, and we had 3.5% unemployment, lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, big wage gains for workers. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta told us the economy is growing at 3 to 3.5%, something Obama never achieved in 8 years in office. And so everything was smooth. It's running so smoothly. I'm like, wait a minute, something's going to have to go wrong here because everything's going too well.
Yes.
And I thought the only thing that could stop this freight train of the American economy would be some kind of what I would describe as a black swan event. And these are events that you can't see coming, that happen rarely, but do happen. And bam, it just hit the economy. This tiny virus has hit the world economy and has brought, right now as we speak, the economy is kind of at a standstill because everything is closed down. And so this is a real risk we're going to probably have a recession. Let's hope it's not a severe recession. But then you ask the question of what happens when this is over? And that's why it's so important. Number one, we had a really sturdy economy with 6 million surplus jobs to begin with. So that gives us a little bit of a cushion. But then, I do believe once they're calling this the flattening of the curve, so that we don't continue to see a rise in the number of people with the virus. And then when that happens, and then after that, you'll obviously see a decline in the caseloads. Then I think, Mr. Mayor, I think you're going to see a dramatic comeback. And the one piece of advice I give to people, I'm not a great financial advisor, but I will tell you this, Mr. Mayor, you are a fool, or anyone is a fool, if they would sell stocks right now, because you never want to sell low. In fact, I just took every penny of cash I had and I bought stocks and I'm not saying, by the way, the sell-off is over, but 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now, the stock market could be double where it is today.
Oh, maybe
so
less.
Blue chips are very cheap.
If you think about 2008, I know people that did either one of those two things.
Yep.
And everybody who stayed was very, very happy and became wealthier. And there are people today, to this day, who I advise not to, who tell me I should have listened to your advice. And the reality is, this is probably even more certain because this is such an external effect. It doesn't emerge from the fundamentals of the economy. I just watched the movie Being There over the weekend.
Oh, that's right.
And Chauncey
in the spring,
Gardner,
there will be growth.
Chauncey Gardner said the economy, it depends on the strength of the seeds that you grow. And then they have to, of course, he was total nonsense, and they took him seriously. But the reality is, this is like the difference between something wrong fundamentally with those seeds and then some terrible thing that attacks the seeds. Well, this is some terrible thing that's attacked them, but they're still there. There'll be some winners and losers, but the fundamentals are still there. And we have a president who has shown that he knows how to create great growth after a recession.
Yes. Now, the one thing that worries me, I agree with everything you just said. You took the words right out of my mouth. By the way, that Peter Sellers movie, if people have not seen Being
Please
There,
watch
it is a classic. One of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. And so in any case, here's what worries me. We do have an election coming up in November. And prior to this coronavirus, I would have put 80 to 90% odds that Trump was going to win re-election. People don't vote against a booming economy.
Right.
What worries me is if people actually think that Joe Biden might be the next president. Does anybody want to invest in that storm? It's so important that we get a big, quick turnaround.
It is. It is important, but I do think the campaign theme then would have to be: do you want to put back the people who couldn't create any kind of growth after a recession, or do you want to put in place the guy who did miracles after a recession?
Well put. Because I just wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal that basically looks, because there's a mythology going on right now, a rewriting of history. The left is very good at that, as you know. And they're basically saying, oh, Obama saved the economy. Obama is the one, who saved us from the Great Depression. No, the evidence is very clear that what Obama gave us was the weakest recovery from a recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s.
Well, Steve, I think your role in the campaign just became as big, or actually even bigger than it was last time. We counted on you a lot last time, and you're going to be a key person this time. So let's keep in touch. Maybe someday we can actually shake hands again.
Yeah. And we got it. One last thing on the way out. Trump is absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. Cut the payroll tax for every one of the 150 million workers and the 27 million employers in this country. That will revitalize the economy.
And will the party of the workers, the Democrats, vote for that?
We will see, because
or are they the party of the non-workers now.
Yeah, they prefer welfare over people's
welfare
paychecks.
over wages. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I'll be talking to you soon, on and off the record.
Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you for everything you've done. We need you badly now. Thank you.
Take care.
And now we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be with Tony Carbonetti. For those of you who know me, in addition to law and politics, I'm passionate about the Yankees, baseball, football, all sports to watch, and cigars to relax and socialize. The revolution was led by one man and one man alone, Marvin Shanken, and Cigar Aficionado magazine. Marvin had been rating wines quite successfully for Wine Spectator magazine, and he brought the rating system to cigars. Even now, the first thing I do when I get my magazine is I go right to the ratings page. Here it is. 93, 91. Oh yeah, I'll go for that one. Then there'll be 94. 92. Problem is you got to get there fast, because they go fast. Welcome back. And I'm here with Anthony Carbonetti, who is, first of all, I should tell you, one of my closest friends, dear friends, but he's also a former chief of staff to a mayor I knew very well. He also happened to have been the chief of staff during the worst attack on the history of the city of New York. And that, of course, was the September 11 attack. And he was a giant during that period of time. Brilliant at organizing and brilliant at politics. And someone who now is a resident, as I am, of the city of New York, somewhat locked in for crimes we didn't commit. And, of course, like all citizens, but citizens who have a lot more experience, wondering, is it being done right? Could it be done better? We're paying a terrible price for this. So let me start with the basic responsibility for something like this is with the mayor's office in every big city, because they're closest to the people.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Mayor.
Well, first of all, thank you for all that you did for the city of New York, and in particular for your heroic efforts during September 11, which have never been adequately recognized, because, frankly, I got all the credit. But I always say
we were a wonderful team.
I rested on the shoulders of giants, and your shoulders were one of the biggest. And Tony was excellent at organization. But some of that, Tony, came from, how many drills and exercises did we do in the 7.5 years leading up to September 11?
We did many, and actually, that was something that you always taught us, was the first time it happens shouldn't be the first time you've seen it.
Right.
And I've taught since then a lot of governors and mayors. I've talked to their staffs about how you prepare for this. You can never be fully prepared, okay? And I tell them, I said, when you sit down with your senior staff, just pick 3 people and say, leave the room, because for whatever reason, you're not here.
Right.
Whether something horrible happened or you physically couldn't be here.
So depending on the period of time I was mayor, so let's take the last period.
Many.
So everybody in New York everybody in the governor's office, everybody in the president's office knew that if you can't get me, you get Joe Lota, you get Tony Carbonetti, you get Bob Harding, or you get the police commissioner, fire commissioner. Those 5 people, you're talking to the mayor.
Going back to the
right?
TWA flight.
Well, then it was a slightly different group, but the same thing.
But we always had a great interaction with the governor's office, the federal government, and President Clinton was president back then.
Yes, it did happen on 9/11. We had a complete Republican lineup. But in one of our great and one of our first really big tragedies, TWA Flight 800 that went down, Bill Clinton, Democratic president, George Pataki, not too long after I supported Cuomo for governor, and George wasn't exactly happy with me.
But his team had a job to do, and they did it admirably. But
completely overcame that. But we also took the lead as the city because we knew the most about it. We knew the most about our city, and we had an articulated emergency response. Now, in this case, it seems to me, the president was more than prepared. He was acting on this back in January before anybody even thought about it, getting criticized. It looked to me like the governor was pretty well prepared. He came in right away, made a deal with the federal government, like the deals we used to make, to get testing here. And for the first 3 weeks, I was saying, where the heck is de Blasio? Had we been in office, or maybe even Bloomberg, they would have all deferred immediately to the mayor as knowing the most about the city. So now he's come in late in the game. He's meeting with no one. And it looks to me like a helter-skelter response, but in a very dangerous situation.
Right. It doesn't seem like people have silos. I mean,
explain that. Explain
if you
silo.
remember,
I'm not. Everyone will understand that.
When we all sat at that morning meeting post September 11th, everybody had an issue. Whether it was you were dealing with the families, this person was dealing with the hospitals, this person was dealing with the terrorism information. So any red tape that needed to be cut could always be discussed at that meeting. The state government was there.
This is another point that people aren't going to understand.
Was there.
Who sat at the head of the table of that meeting?
Well, it was yourself, Governor Pataki, and Joe Alba, head of FEMA.
So, at the head of every day, first 3 times a day, then twice a day, the representative of the President of the United States, who ran FEMA, sent there by President Bush, the governor of the state of New York, and the mayor of the city of New York, had their staff meeting together for 2.5 months.
Yes. And everybody had a silo that they were in charge of. And whenever an issue arose where they had hit a wall or thought it would take too much time, they could raise it to the group, and the group would figure out how to cut that red tape and get it done immediately. So whether it was funding, because sometimes, of course, there was certain funding that needed legislation to be released or needed an emergency declaration to be released. And it could all be discussed right there. And Alba would say, I'm going to get on the phone with the president and the OMB director, and we'll take care of that today.
And when congressmen and senators asked to have representatives at that meeting,
they were allowed. Hillary Clinton sat in the meeting.
Hillary Clinton sat in the meeting.
Chuck Schumer sat
in the meeting. Congressmen sat in the meeting. Senators had some of their staff sit in at the meetings.
Yes.
We even had discussions about, we need a lot of money, but don't play the usual game. Let's not try to, pay for the Bang on the Can orchestra in Far Rockaway.
Right.
This is not the right time to play that game, boys. Remember, we had a little of that, right?
And the police always want toys. They always want to buy more toys.
And the police, this isn't time to get the convertible police car,
right?
Right. So you can get sun while you're. So, but I don't see that. I see, and I commented on this really to encourage it. I see a good working relationship, at least adequate, between Albany and Washington here. I don't see how this guy's even how de Blasio's cut into it. Where's the daily meeting with the governor? There should be a daily meeting with the governor. And here, things like this happen, Tony. Right now, the city needs more water. City needs more water. City needs more toilet paper.
Yes.
I don't get that one. Well, right at the meeting, we would sit there and I'd be able to say to the governor, we need more toilet paper. The governor would say, well, we don't make toilet paper. Or maybe we do in the prisons. I remember the prisons supplied us a lot of stuff.
Yes.
It came out. But Joe Alba could say, Oh, yeah, I know the two big factories that make paper. If we can get some emergency equipment back and forth, we'll get it for you.
We had someone
and you'd get it in a day.
We had someone designated to deal with the private sector. So that person would say, oh, I need to speak to Home Depot or Lowe's or whoever it was. And if he or she didn't know someone
who would talk to Home Depot, for example?
Well, you picked up the phone and called to Ken Langone, and it happened like that.
Or how about GE?
Okay. Exactly.
First day we're there, we realize we're going to be there for 6 months.
Jeff Immelt stepped
First
up.
day we're there, no lights, no electricity. We didn't think we'd have it for 6 months because they blew out all the switches in Lower Manhattan. Next morning, make a call to GE, new chairman of GE.
Yep.
Jack had left. I get him on the phone. I tell him where his generators are. Immediately he says, Mayor, how long did it take for Jack to get him there? I said about 2 hours. He said, I'll get him there an hour and a half. And then he offered me $10 million for the
victims,
for which I bless him every day.
And Home Depot sent supplies, but there was someone coordinating that.
Rudy Washington, all of the equipment, all the heavy equipment. Any time an issue came up, we've got to get these 3 gigantic pieces of equipment, but the tunnel is blocked. Rudy Washington was the guy you went to. By the time we were finished with a week, everybody knew who. You didn't have to come to me. You go right to Tony, right to Rudy.
Even talking about post-incident, the cleanup, the fact that there were no deaths was because everything was organized, okay? And everybody had their silo, and they were able to sit at a table and work together. And that only came because we practiced it.
So I think without fear of politicizing this, because I'm not. This is professional. Because I am saying I believe that the Democratic governor has done as good a job as I can see from the outside. I find no criticisms.
He's giving people
of the way
information in a timely way.
He's been visible. In fact, for a while, he was the only voice for New York. De Blasio is now putting his voice in, but given the fact that he hasn't done the background work and he isn't there at those meetings with the governor, I don't know how good his decisions are. I don't know how good the facts he's getting are. This idea of locking everybody in for 2 or 3 weeks, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Locking people in is draconian. Locking people in can create mental illness. It can create stress. I'm not going too far as to say it can create suicide.
Well, no one wants to be confined with their family for that long.
Or by themselves.
Okay.
for
or
that
by
long.
themselves.
How many times did we find a suicide with a person that was abandoned, in an older person?
Sure.
Who we're worried about older people dying from this virus. Some of these older people may die from neglect.
My wife has to leave the house every morning to go give her 88 and 84-year-old parents their medication.
And if they didn't have, your in-laws have a very big family, thank God. But for some people don't. We lost a woman, remember, with the building collapse.
Sure.
She was living alone. We couldn't even find her family. We had to bury her ourselves at St. Patrick's Cathedral because they were paying more attention to the horse than the human being.
That's right.
Remember that, Tony? You were the one who pointed that out.
I was the poster child for the ASPCA. I got all the nasty letters.
So when I hear these decisions, and then de Blasio's statement that we could be going into a massive recession. Well, we could be going into a massive recession. We could not be going into a massive recession. Why do we want to frighten people with that now, with the worst possible prediction, when there's no definite conclusion? Let's give people the facts. Let's not extrapolate from them. And then let's give them hope. That's how you get through an emergency. He ends these things with, we're going to do all these things, and then we're going to go into a recession. I'm going to get locked into my house for 3 weeks, and then we'll have a recession. As opposed to, if I have to be locked in my house, I'm going to come out to a healthy city.
Exactly.
A better city, a stronger city.
People need to be given the hope of, once we get through this, remember, things were great right beforehand, so why won't they be great again? Okay? And, you and I might differ a little on how this works, and I think it's because I think the 24-hour news media has already corrupted people's minds into, oh my God, I cannot be around more than X number of people without catching it.
I don't think we disagree.
Okay.
I think we disagree on how do we deal with it. There's no question that this is a terrible thing. there's no question that a lot of people are going to die. But then there's no question it needs perspective. Right now, as of today, 6 people have died in New York. Or it could be 9. The state, we're not sure about the city. When I became mayor of New York City, I took over a city in which 6 people and 7 were being murdered every single day. Every single day. Now, I could have locked many, many people in their houses for 24 hours a day.
Right.
And I would have eliminated those murders. But then what would I have done on the other side of it? Or every year for the last 30 years, we've had way more than these number of deaths to influenza, which is transmitted the same way. We could have locked people in for the entire flu season, and we would have had half the number of deaths, a quarter of the deaths. But what was the price we were paying on the other side? Right now, the news media and the hysteria has driven us into an area of political correctness where if you raise that, I think politicians feel they're going to be destroyed. If they raise common sense concerns with going too far. But we are going, in my personal view, and I'm not running for office, we are going too far. And sometimes leadership means balance, not just giving into every one of the hysterical, let's lock them all up.
But you know, from being a leader and presiding over the largest decline in murders in the history of any major city, all murders are not equal. If you go home at night and the police yellow tape is at the house next door, you say to you, oh my God, what happened? And if your wife says the neighbor was murdered, there's a panic that goes through you, fear for your family, and then she says, her cousin came over, they had a bad business deal, he shot him. You say, okay, honey, what's for dinner? Because it's wrapped up, there isn't a random murderer running around your neighborhood.
One of the responsibilities of a leader is to manage a crisis, an emergency, a panic, and remove the emotional overreaction as much as possible. Not to play into it and not to pander. That's missing here.
Yeah, now people need to be calmed down.
But that's part of leadership. Leadership is not saying to people what they want to hear or what the media has said, oh, lock everybody up, nobody will die. And therefore you can't say the opposite, which is some of those people you lock up may die.
Right.
Your economy may get so hurt that people will starve to death. So leadership is about giving people the truth, giving people balance, and then giving them a realistic hope that they're going to come out of this. And it's sure missing in New York City. I can't evaluate the other cities. San Francisco looks almost as bad, but
they locked everyone down.
Yeah. And this is the product of having elected mayors that should never have been elected mayors. And you make the wrong choice at the ballot box, and people can die. Well, Tony, we're going to be back again because this is going to go on for a while, and maybe we can get more specific about some of the things that could be done, and hopefully somebody will listen.
Happy to do it.
Thank you, Tony, and God bless you, and happy St. Patrick's Day, which was on Wednesday.
That's right.
And then happy St. Joseph.
My half-Irish kids had fun.
Your half-Irish kids have fun, and my nuns who trained me to be Irish, even though I'm Italian, have fun. And then happy St. Joseph's Day, which is the Italian holiday. And now we'll go like this because we're not allowed. And for Italians, this is very tough because we like to hug. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
I found both of those interviews really very, very interesting because they brought out facts that we haven't thought about that puts this in perspective. I mean, Steve Moore pointed out that although we see this as an effect on our economy, this is not a rise from our economy. This is not an indication of a weakness in our economy. This is something totally exterior to it. It'd be like an act of God that they have in contracts, or as I pointed out from being there, when Chauncey Gardner talks about economic policy and if the seeds are good, then they're going to grow by the time we get to the autumn. Well, the seeds are good, and they've been interrupted by a hurricane or a rain, and they're going to be fine. There will be a recession, Steve believes. Now, of course, that's a prediction. He may or may not be wrong. But if there is one, it's still not going to affect the fundamentals of this economy that was extraordinary. It's not going to affect, ultimately, the airline industry. It's not going to affect the growing exportation of oil and natural gas. That natural gas and that oil is still in the ground there, and we're energy independent like we've never been before. Every country in the world is being affected by this, so it's not as if this hit is only on America. So our relative standing in the world is going to remain roughly the same. We're still going to be by far the richest country on earth. And we're probably going to have one of the best organized recoveries, particularly if you take a look at China, a couple of other places where it's been handled. There'll be another extraordinary difference between the United States and China for the world to see. And then Tony Carbonetti went more toward the emergency response, which of course means a lot to me because I did an awful lot of them, and I think I did probably the most difficult one the country has ever encountered, the sneak attack of September 11. That sometimes when I think about it, unfortunately creates some pause. But one of the key factors to why that was done so well, and it wasn't just me, and it's the reason I always say it was a team, was that the governor and I made a decision. As soon as he found out that I was alive, actually, because he thought I was dead for about a half hour, we made a decision, we're going to run our governments together. I don't think anybody's ever done that before. We had staff meetings every day in a big place, big hall. It was at the police academy and then at a pier. And every day, his staff, my staff, sat down as if they were having a staff meeting with the mayor, with the governor. We did it together. Within 2 days, President Bush gave us Joe Alba, who was the head of FEMA, and the federal government was at that staff meeting. So by Friday, 4 days later, the city government, the state government, and the federal government were working together. That expedited bureaucratic process by days, even in gruesome things like having to get enough caskets or having to make sure we had the right generators. Instead of waiting 4 days, approved by Albany, 2 days, approved by Washington, and then to narrow our financial requests, we had the congressmen and the senators, they had representatives there. And they were quite willing to not use it and block it all up with, requests for special little projects and this kind of thing and that kind of thing. Like we see someone trying to put requests in for abortion money for this. There's no room for that now. But the failure here is a mayor who hasn't been a mayor. And therefore, when this first happened, all the focus went right to the governor. And to his credit, Governor Cuomo did 2 jobs for a while. The governor and the mayor, and de Blasio was kind of in the background. It should have gone right to the mayor, because he should have had the structure there. He should have had the people running the silos that Tony Carbonetti is working on, and now he's playing catch-up. I would urge, so that irresponsible decisions aren't made by the mayor, that he join in concert with Governor Cuomo, and that their governments come together, that they forget any former issues, and they focus on the best possible response. Because as we will talk about in future episodes, this is a terrible, terrible thing. It has to be dealt with in order to save as many lives as possible, but it can't be dealt with out of fear. It can't be dealt with out of panic. It can't be dealt with out of just doing whatever the wildest, put everybody in their houses and don't let them come out. That's the way you could solve murder. We put everybody in the houses that wouldn't come out. That's how we could solve influenza for the last 20 years. We put everybody in the houses and they wouldn't come out. We need to have common sense, and we need to have leaders who are willing to take some criticism for maybe not going quite so far. Because remember, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And when you lock people up and you don't let them come out of their houses for significant periods of time, and we're talking about millions and millions and millions of people, do you realize the damage that you do? Do you realize the psychological and physical damage that you do? And if we're worried mostly about our frail elderly, the most damage is done to them, both in the physical and in the emotional area. So please, please, someone bring common sense to this. We've got to do everything we can within reason to reduce the impact of this. But we can't reduce the impact of this and ruin structures of our society and harm more people than we may be helping. That's what leadership is really about, not just doing what the wild and sometimes irresponsible media drives you to do. Thank you, and we will be back, and certainly we'll be back, talking about this subject and hopefully bringing some wisdom and common sense to it in the future. Thank you.